So we have 4 great panelists. Obviously, some of you've met Bree before. And we have Bree's husband, Will. so
Busted.
So that's kind of
Date
fun.
night.
I've never had a husband and wife on a panel before, which is kind of fun. We have Adam, who so we have Adam, who was at Havas and was at Big Bob's Discount Furniture. Sorry, I was calling it Bill's for some reason. And we have David, who is at Placed. And you should give a round of applause to David, because he just sold his company to Snap. So that's a thing. So that's the thing. So yeah, so he's buying all the drinks afterwards. And Will, Will comes from Mullen, and Bree, as you all know, comes from Havas. And so we have a couple of people from Havas in the house, apparently. So we have a great mix here of someone who's worked in retail, though also has an agency background, a couple of agency people, and a vendor in the space, right? So we got to purposely trying to have a nice mix of people to talk about this. And I want to start, and Bree, because you're the most popular, or maybe you meant not the most popular, but you have the best entourage. I'm going to start with this question to you, which is, some of the changes we see in Capitol Hill. And so I talked about net neutrality. We can talk about that if you like. But I also want to talk about the fact that ISPs are being opened up to do kind of whatever they want for their data, which I think might be good for us. I mean, I know that I've always worried about doing the right thing about privacy, but, if we don't care about privacy, maybe it's a good thing. I don't know. Why don't you kick us off with some thoughts about that?
Sure. So I think putting my industry hat on, obviously it's a great thing. Access to more data, more behavioral data, hugely important. I mean, we're moving from a world of defining people based on their age or their demo to how they behave. So it's a great thing for us, but I think there are obvious, possibly moral questions, not for me. But definitely.
What could go wrong?
Right, what could go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong?
But one of the things we were talking about before the panel is how much privacy really matters to our end consumers. And for me, one of the things that I think is happening is I think that you have a much more self-aware consumer. I think that people are, evidence has shown, people are willing to exchange their data if they get something in return. Sometimes that means a better experience, sometimes that means a coupon, sometimes that means a discount. So I think that when we talk about privacy, it's a mistake to talk about it in general terms, and it's important that we think about what does privacy really mean to people, and are we using it in a way that, yes, we're going to get a conversion, but are we also using it in a way to deliver a better experience? Does it mean, that I can actually find you across screens and I can understand exactly who you are based on your PII potentially, and maybe I don't have to serve you so many ads? Because when we think about that, I think it's kind of a different conversation. I think it's not as ambiguous a topic as you would think.
I think that here's.
Are you going to argue with your
no,
wife
I'm
right out of the bat?
Just so
Come
hard
on,
to decide.
Come on. Adam, I'm so happy you're in the middle. So good.
The thing that's changing, though, that's interesting is that exchange has been fine for like a number of years. Like, people use Facebook Connect if they get something in exchange. At what point do they start saying no when they realize decisions are being made about them for what they do, whether it's insurance or medical bills or all of those things based on their browser histories? And I think that's the thing that most people in America probably aren't aware of. If net neutrality ends, as it's due to do, I think, at the end of this year, that's, I think, the real point where people go, oh, hang on a minute, it's not just about me sharing something to get something back. It's what I've done will now decide how brands will kind of judge me.
So what do you think will happen? So let's just play it out, and again, kind of without prejudice, right? So just, for whatever reason, net neutrality goes away, and more importantly, because I think this has already happened, whether or not net neutrality goes away, the ISPs are allowed to use the data that they, in fact, I know this is true. ISPs are now allowed to use all the data, all the browsing data that they get for any purpose, right? So, and I think they've said we're not going to do anything with it, but let's for a moment say that they change their minds at some point and they do something with it. Is that good for us?
I don't know. It depends. I mean, the net neutrality was a law that was passed last year that isn't due to come into effect till the end of this year. So you're right. It currently, ISPs can do what they want.
Yeah.
It is relatively good for brands and advertisers. and it's going to get increasingly bad for consumers because it won't just be annoying ads that are chasing them. It'll be they got turned down for healthcare, or they got their insurance premium went up 30% because their browsing history showed that they were exploring illnesses that they thought they had, and then these decisions start being accounted for.
I think the browsing history is kind of the line in terms of where people would say, okay, so you can see all the sites that I've been to, because Google, you see my Gmail, I don't care. You see my search terms, it's not a big deal. But if you can actually see all the sites that you've been to over the last year, if I took everyone's, and to give you an idea, we measure location data. We see about 1,000 locations per user per day. We've got 2.5 million people that have double opted in because we give the right value exchange where they think, hey, this makes sense. I can donate to a charity. I get airline miles. I get paid directly. But if I went in and I gave that same incentive and I said, give me all of your browser data and I can do what I want with that data set, I think most people here would be like, no chance at all. Like even for $1,000, I would not give up my browser history data because they could see that data set out
Just ask all those people that got caught in Ashley Madison.
Yeah.
But David, you're giving a great example of value exchange, right? And so you've got a panel of a few million people, something like that. They're all getting something out of the fact that they're sharing data. The issue with the changes on Capitol Hill is that there is no value exchange, and more importantly, there's no control by the consumer. It's just completely open. And so when consumers actually get to the point of realizing all of this is going on and their data is being used, not just to target ads, because there's an argument to say that's a better experience and everything like that, but is being monetized for many other reasons, then it starts to get scary. And I think going back to James's original question, is this good for us? Us in the room as the industry, I think in the short term, this can be a good thing. It's better data. We can make our ad campaigns work better. We can drive our clients' business, our businesses, whatever it is. But that's a short-term thing because at some point, consumers are going to start to really get to understand this. And I think that the advocacy groups and groups who are against this kind of openness on the internet in terms of data sharing are going to start to get more vocal about it. When people begin to realize that their data is being shared and that all these companies are really profiting off of their data and the consumer's getting nothing for it, that starts to become a bigger issue, and I think there's going to be a big backlash.
Getting nothing, or worse, getting hurt, to use the insurance example.
And this has been around for a while. There's a Guardian UK journalist called John Ronson who did an experiment where he basically created 10 fake profiles of himself. It was about 10 years ago, by performing lots of different actions. None of them really were digital. He signed up for, let's say, an NRA newsletter. He visited a few websites that were quite right-wing. He subscribed to Gun and Hunting magazine. He did a few things like that. And he had one address, one P.O. box. And he did a whole bunch of other things, again, mainly offline, because this was an old experiment. Signed up to a different P.O. box. And he created like 10 personas of himself. And then looked at the difference between the things that came through his mailbox that were credit card offers and the ones which were deemed to be by the credit card companies a person who would likely borrow more money and be, frankly, more financially dumb. He was getting the 0% down offers, but with massive interest rates. And the other persona, guess what, was getting, the platinum card, proposal as well. So this has been around for a long time. The problem is, it's crossed that line, and I think the public consciousness will go up.
Yeah, I think it potentially does create long-term implications, but I can think of a short-term one for our industry. I mean, you talked about, data science and automation, how that might put us all out of jobs. I think where we're all headed is content, right? We all talk to our clients, content's the way forward. Well, one of the rules that the FCC has said is we're going to put some rules in place to make sure that ISPs, don't discriminate, they don't have anything that's harmful. One of the other things they said was no unfair paid promotion. So what that means is, don't worry, we're not going to put your native ads too far up front and create a bad experience for you. But the reality is we're headed towards a place very quickly with this where all of a sudden those native ads that we all think, great, that's where we can shift our banner money from, we can sell that right into clients, that makes a lot of sense. That goes downhill really quickly and it just becomes another sort of banner blindness type of phenomenon.
I think that's what Yahoo did. They transformed from this banner model to this native advertising model. And, there's not a privacy issue there, but they tried to adopt to this native way of showing ads. And my personal opinion is nothing against anybody, but I don't think that's effective in the same way because it appears as content, but it's not content. And everybody knows who's looking at it is not content. And so, I just think that, you get into a place like that, you gravitate around one type of ad format or one type of approach, and, it doesn't have the same type of legs.
Any questions from the audience on this subject? Going once? And I'm going to give you a free pass on the first round, but the next time I'm going to actually pick someone. So you, all right, yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, what I'm really talking about is sort of the programmatic implementation of ads that appear as content in the environment that that they're in. So it's not a line around a box around an ad, or not. I mean, right. It's something that appears. I mean, it always says sponsored, but it appears in the stream as content. It's a little off topic, but it is. I don't think it's something that. I think it's something the advertising industry thought consumers were going to absolutely love because it doesn't look like an ad. I don't think they love it.
Well, see, that's the thing is that they actually get a really good response rate from it because it's coming from Globe staff or Boston.com staff, and people are.
Yeah, but so I think what you're describing is a different thing.
I can actually call it content. It's
right.
like it's
right.
Native is a weird one because it's almost like, really, it's just about contextual alignment of a message within an environment, which could be a well-placed ad, it could be content, and it could be a whole bunch of things. It could just be some awful clickbait at the bottom of the screen that you look at it, and it's like, these pictures of X star will shock you. And you're like, you click on it because you're a dumb.
And that stuff is considered native content.
And you're like, oh,
I'm sure, Will, you've never.
Why am I at this weird website?
Right. and look, there's all these companies out there, and they've done very well for themselves, but they take the data, the browsing data, and the data that's on the page, and the user behavior data, and they exactly do that. They plant stories. There's plenty of companies that have done very well out there that do this, plant stories that are supposedly relevant to the consumer, and it's all the clickbait type of stuff. I mean, I think when you're talking about something where a publisher actually takes it upon themselves to do an integrated feature with an advertiser, that's different. That's not just a bunch of crap that fills up your news feed. That is, something that. One takes you off-site, one keeps you inside. I don't know if that's the difference. I look at the difference as how the ads are sort of manifest, and if the ads are manifest in, in real content as something that's that's valid and valuable versus a 3.8% APR rate type thing. There's a big difference between those things.
All right. So let's move to the next topic, which Adam, you were just talking. I'm going to get you to talk some more. Let's talk about retail. So the changing nature of retail. Adam, you went from a big gig in an agency to a big gig at a retailer, and you were there for a while. Tell us about the story of what you learned there and what was different. You've got to have had a different experience inside an agency versus inside a client. It's got to be very different. And you're inside a client who's going through big changes. Mm-hmm. So without divulging things that they wouldn't want you to divulge, tell us a story about what you learned there.
What I learned many things, but one of the biggest things I learned was I think, and I don't know if most of the people here are I'm guessing probably either agency or publisher / vendor side.
Let's try. How many?
Are there any brand direct representatives in the room?
Yeah, there are some. I know there are some. They're not
Just
putting
one?
up their hands. One, two,
couple,
3, 4. Yeah.
Right.
They're shy.
So I think the thing that was most shocking to me was in an agency, everybody is focused around what's the new thing, what's the next thing, how can I bring my clients something exciting that they haven't seen before that's going to drive their business, and people get really excited about that, and people are rewarded for that in an agency, and it's encouraged. In a client business, or specifically in a retail business, there's much. It's a much kind of, I would say, truer look at the world, if that's a word, truer, realer look at the world, where it's, I think that people on the client side don't want something that's innovative for the sake of being innovative or new or a different way to do it. They want something that's absolutely going to drive business without question. And I think, and I know that sounds like, yeah, of course, everybody wants to drive business, but I think that that's a lot of the tension that gets set up between agencies and clients is because agencies want to do these great new big things that are exciting and everyone can rally around, whereas clients are like, that's great, I love that idea, but is that going to bring people through the door? Is that going to bring people to my website? And so I would say that that's the biggest difference I see between the two. In terms of the retail business in general, back to your points earlier, retail is selling things is not struggling. The idea of a brick and mortar business is struggling. Certain brick and mortars are doing fine. A lot of them, as you indicated, James, are not. And look, we've got Amazon, we've got a million different ways to buy things online. What the online experience doesn't offer is that touch and feel moment that a consumer says, I want this thing. And that's going to be hard to get away from. So I think that there are categories within retail that are going to be a lot slower to be forced to adopt to digital life. If you're buying a car, most people want to drive it. If you're buying a sofa, most people want to sit on it. If you're buying a TV, most people want to see it. Now, it doesn't mean the transaction's not going to happen online, and that's important. What's also important is that the retail experience is not just about driving people into the store to buy a product. The retail experience is about truly a multi-channel, multi-touch point experience for the consumer. Because very rarely now, I shouldn't say very rarely, but it's less common now for somebody to just walk into a store and buy something. People are very often looking online first to make the decision about what type of store they want to go to. Then they decide what product they want. They look online for that. So there's a big, I would say, very just a lot of different touch points that consumers are using. And I think that certain retailers have adapted very well to that, but certain retailers have not. And what I would say is, the big retailers who we consider big retailers now, maybe Amazon, obviously, Walmart, to a large extent, probably Target, who are doing well, have been able to embrace this multi-channel world. They're not just online retailers, and they're not just offline retailers. They're doing both really well. Amazon is what it is. I mean, it's amazing, and we all love it. But so those are all the big guys. They've got lots of money. They're able to invest in amazing websites and maybe amazing mobile experiences. But then there's this long tail of retailers where there's hundreds of thousands of stores out there who might have one store, who might have 10 stores, who might have 50 stores, that aren't at the level of these major national retailers that are not yet, really haven't embraced the digital world yet. And they're the ones who are really losing out as the bigger digital players are coming in and really kind of eating their lunch.
I think, as you say, it's not necessarily that the transaction happens online or that the transaction happens in store. I think that clearly the journey is changing, and we're all marketers. We love the funnel, but it's not sequential, and it doesn't work that way. And I think the marketers that can adapt to that and can understand that and can create a more consistent omni-channel experience and, frankly, value a touch point like an actual retail store are really interesting. What I think is really interesting is we talk about Amazon as, the ultimate sort of holy grail of e-com. But Amazon has been investing a huge amount in bricks and mortar, right? They just opened in the last 3 months, 10 Amazon Books stores. There's one right up at Market Street in in Linfield. And that's all about the touch and feel. I mean, there's obvious benefit for them, right, in terms of their business. You can go there and you can return. I don't have to have a UPS guy pick up at my store, at my house. But thinking of, that's obviously, one of the largest retailers, certainly the largest in our world and in the US, looking at that omni-channel strategy and what's missing for them. So I think that there is an opportunity to understand what that physical location brings to the table. I think that as marketers, we are totally in the dark about how to value it, and we have this misperception that it comes at the end of the journey, and it doesn't.
If only we had someone on the panel who knew something about location.
So,
Well,
So my new company.
so everyone talks about the death of retail. I think it's over. It's hyped up. So here's a couple examples. H&M has opened up a couple hundred stores in the U.S. over the last year. Dollar General just announced that they're going to open about 1,000 stores. Aldi is doing a big push where they're going to actually get about 1,000 stores over the next 5 years. So it's really what you're seeing is the digitalization of retail in the physical world. So just like you optimize out of a media plan with no second thoughts, like I'm going to cancel the buy and I'm going to put it somewhere else. I think you're starting to see that for retail where people are just saying, no, it doesn't make sense for me to have a store here. It's not working. I'm going to close it down. And then somebody else is going to come in and fill the gap. Now, there will always be places like that mall that you went to when you were a kid and now it's completely empty and there's 2 stores in there. Those will disappear, but it'll focus in on that premium content. And malls are actually doing really well. It's just certain malls are doing better than others and they're going to cut down that inventory. So I think it's really almost like remnant inventory, where you've got remnant inventory and like people will bid against it up to a certain price, but at a certain point you're going to cut it and they're going to focus in on those premium, those head publishers that you can actually go after, those head locations. Even like Boston here, like I lived here about 20 years ago and it has completely changed, but that retail corridor wasn't there as big as it is today. And now you walk around for 6 or 7 blocks, you got a ton of stores where they didn't exist 20 years ago.
I mean, it comes down to the idea of the showroom, and it's a place where you can go look at a product, but not necessarily expect to put it in your car and take it home. And that's probably where a lot of these big retailers are going, where a consumer, they want to see it, they don't want to buy it online, they can come into the store and see it. But what's going to change is 2 things. One is the footprint of the store. You're going to go from 30, 40,000 square foot stores all over the place, probably 100,000 square foot stores all over the place, to a much smaller footprint, which costs a lot less to operate. And then the second thing that's going to change is the inventory that's available. They're not going to keep all this stuff on site. They're not going to keep all this stuff in the back room that you can just put in your car and take it. It's then going to get delivered it might get delivered that same day. And that's ultimately, I think, what the consumer is going to want. But the nature of how that transaction happens is really going to evolve.
It's kind of about data too, right? I think that, in the old world when you were Macy's, you looked at your balance sheet from a real estate perspective, can you invest in this? But I think marketers are deploying data in a very different way in terms of what that footprint looks like. And I mean, we all live in a digital world, so, the SERP is the digital shelf. What happens you need that physical shelf as well, but you should apply that same data in terms of what products should be there and, how much should you invest from an overhead perspective.
I've got a quick thing on Amazon, and then I think we have a couple of questions as well from my lone supporter from Need Your Help.
Not anymore. You don't know what the question is.
And Amazon's like this big thing. So one of my clients is Bose. Typical. They started off in the 70s or 60s selling, direct to consumer, selling the Soundwave radio in newspaper ads, and that was it. It was like literally people fill out their forms, they send it to Bose sent them the stuff. Then they expanded out to use resellers, so the Best Buys, all of the electronic stores that then sell their products. And then increasingly, Amazon has become the big thing for them. It's like 50% of their sales. And they're going, this is great. Amazon's really important. They're funneling a large amount of marketing budget is increasingly going direct to Amazon because Amazon data is so powerful that you can target them on or off to Amazon. And then Amazon start building speakers. And then suddenly my client goes, oh, crap. Like, what do I do now that I've had this great distribution network and now my biggest reseller is now going to start to become my biggest competitor? And then Apple launches HomePod and all those things. So I guess it's like you have to evolve or die, like marketing. Anyone who is older, like me and you, what we were doing 20, 30 years ago is radically different to what we're doing now. That's kind of the cool thing about our business, though.
Yeah, I think it's the coolest thing about our business. Questions? Yes, we have one back there.
That's 20.
Was that your fan?
Yes. Question from Kristen.
Yes.
I would say just real quick from the Amazon perspective, in Seattle, they actually have grocery stores now. And the grocery stores, you can order and pick it up. It's not the cheapest out there, but it's the most convenient. But they also are opening up convenience stores now. There's two on the Amazon campus. You walk in, you have your Amazon Prime, you swipe it through, and you can just pick stuff up and you can just leave. So I think you've got the right point in terms of there's certain things that people don't care about brand loyalty. It's the lowest price, or is it more convenient that they'll just go in and go after that? So I think there's going to be a lot of competition there. I would say from a retail standpoint, there is differences. Like you go to a Saks Fifth Avenue because they have a certain line of product versus a Target if you're shopping for clothes. And I think those lines will still exist over time. And the last part is like QSRs. There's certain things that you cannot make digital. And like QSR is a great example. They spend a ton. We work with 9 out of the top 12 in the U.S. We work with a couple from up here as well, the agency side. It's like you optimize that all day long because if I can spend $1, I can get $3 in sales on top of that. That is a DR channel that didn't exist 2 years ago.
So I think that brand loyalty is like well and alive. And I think that the way that we need to drive brand loyalty is changing drastically. I think that you used to be able to say, okay, here's my marketing department, and you guys go do an advertising campaign and give me a brand personality, a couple mood boards, a sweet little 30-second spot, and 1984, I love you, Apple. I don't think that's going to drive brand loyalty. I think it's all about the user experience, and you can lose me if your page doesn't load and you don't remember my credit card number, and I forget what app, the Fairmont app. I never stop hearing about it from Will because he doesn't stay signed in. And I love my points in my hotels, but we almost can't stay there because of the app. So I think that
First world problems, Fairmont hotel people.
I'll talk to you guys about hotel points later. I'm deep in that game. There's loyalty for you. But I think that the user experience is more important than ever. And frankly, I think that's why Amazon is winning, right? Yes, we go, it's not because it's cheaper. Definitely not Amazon Pantry. It's not because it has the selection. I could probably find that elsewhere, especially if I'm a little inventive on Google. But it's because of the convenience, right? So I think that as marketers, thinking about how teams are structured and what we have to do, that's what's going to drive brand loyalty.
And I agree with Brie 100%. I mean, I would say the brand and the product and every extension of it, which includes consumer experience, which includes customer service, which includes product quality, is more important than ever. I think that consumers are more loyal to their brands than they ever were because they believe that the decisions they're making are the best and they want to stick with what they're doing. But it can't be solved with an ad campaign. It can't be solved with an innovative new product. It's got to be solved with this kind of end-to-end customer experience that is, as much about I would say the time that happens after the sale as it is the time that happens before the sale. And keeping that customer happy after the sale and coming back is just as critical to that amazing TV spot that gets them to buy it in the first place. What I've seen, so just one quick point. There was years and years ago, there were a couple companies out there, Patagonia was one, Orvis was one, that would stand by their products no matter what happened. You've had it for maybe not 15 years, but like 5 years, and the product deteriorates, they will replace that. I've seen that happen that happens all the time now. I had a pair of Beats headphones that I had for a year and a half, and they broke. Apple replaced them within one day. It was no questions asked. And Apple is good on customer experience, but that is the type of thing that a lot of brands are having to really evolve to a point where they're taking care of their customer long after that purchase happens.
Yeah.
And then teeny final thing, brand loyalty has changed. It used to be defined by age. Like as you get older, like you define yourself by the brands that you select, they define you, whether it's fashion or the brands you purchase. And as you get older, you start to trust brands. I think what's changing is kind of like whether it's free ship, free return, like the collapse of the customer journey from used to be 2 weeks for premium headphones, it could be a matter of hours. The risk to try a new brand has never been lower.
Yeah.
Therefore, the potential to get brand loyalties has never been easier.
Other questions? Yes, over here.
I'm just curious who you think is doing it really well from a retailer perspective, and specifically those who have started at brick and mortar and now have to translate to, like Amazon obviously started online and now is going to retail, so they have an advantage, but those that have started as brick and mortar and now need to connect to online consumer experience.
So one of you, who wants to take it?
Walmart's killing it right now. Like from a digital perspective, like they were so far behind Amazon. I think now they've moved up. They're top 5, top 10 minimum, and you actually see that in the earnings now for Walmart, where they actually call out this is how digital is growing, and it's growing at double digits versus their retail stores are more single digits.
And Kit and Ace and Lululemon, they're from the same parent company. They're killing it.
What are they doing specifically?
So one of the things that they do that I think is really interesting is they are very sort of data centric in selecting their locations, and they customize their actual store design and their ambassadors and their recruitment process to the actual location. And the same thing in terms of like their inventory load that they have. It's different by store. And they don't keep a lot sort of on site. I think they invest in I know they invest in a huge amount of training for their associates and their brand ambassador program for local influencers, if you want to call them that.
Fantastic. All right, so let's move to the next subject. This is a fun one, the changing role of the agency. So one of our sponsors, he's not up here, Message Gears, they're going to have a short talk afterwards, my friend Roger. He came to me a little while ago. He's from MadTech. He's been involved in MadTech all his life, and now he's running this email company. He came to me and said, "How about we do a partnership? You know, you've got this big agency sales force. You know a lot of agency people. We don't. So how about we do some partnership?" And so we started talking to some of our agency people about email. Crickets, like just crickets. But I know you were in a client direct. Email's super important part of the marketing stack. So there's a dichotomy going on between what agencies are doing and what agencies are not doing, or maybe different types of agencies are doing different types of things. Yeah. You know, and you know, media is not always bought in the agency now. You've got site retargeting being bought by clients direct. You've got what was once clearly the purview of the agency being diluted and coming over to the client. What's going to happen here?
I mean, I think there's certain areas of the business that logically fit very well into living at the client direct. I think email is one of them. Site retargeting is one of them. The website itself is one of them. There's other areas because it comes down to own data. The client owns the data. They need the agency less than they do to build a media recommendation or build an ad campaign. They can't do that on their own. An individual company, a brand, can, if they've got an email list, they've got a database. Not that they're everyone's doing everything that they can with them, but they have the capability to do that. Or I should say the capability is out there somewhere if they wanted to actually get it done themselves. So, it is something that's a little bit perplexing. I don't quite understand why media agencies typically don't do email, whereas they do everything else, even things that are becoming more and more owned at a client, like retargeting and that type of thing. I just think that, email started from a different place than media did. And the evolution of it just happened in a natural way, where it was probably at one point part of the IT department or something like that at a company, and then it evolved and it stayed within the company, and brands have then found solutions for that. There's a million email providers out there that can help you optimize, build creative, segment your database, everything like that, and build campaigns towards individuals. So brands are able to do that on their own. Brands have a less easy time building a network TV media buy or something like that. So I think the email thing comes down to that. But look, I mean, agencies are advisors, they're consultants, and the importance of the agency doesn't go away at all. I mean, I think especially in this, the way the world is now, there's all these things we're talking about. These are complex issues to solve. And, brands can't do it all on their own. Brands need agencies. There's no question about it. What the agencies are doing is changing a little bit, but I think brands lean on agencies to essentially solve the communications problem. They might implement things on their own to an extent, but the agencies are the ones who really are still able to do that better than anyone.
I think it's our structure, and I think we're fucked up. I think it comes. I think it as agencies. Sorry. I think it comes down to two things. I think it's campaign and creative. I think Adam said it earlier. You know, when Adam went to the client side, it was like, oh, we're not doing. It's not. We don't get points for new and innovative. We get points for keeping the business running. And I think as agencies, the nature of our engagement, more often than not, is here's the campaign and here's the campaign effort. And I work on Fidelity, and we went through an effort last year from an email perspective of figuring out just how many emails we send people, and it was a whopping 34 on average from a marketing perspective, and that doesn't even include the perspective for your FID funds, right? And that was because, you know, we've got a lot of things going on. We have brokerage over here and retirement over here. So we went ahead and we created inbox management, which is a governing initiative. It says you can only get 8 from marketing. So now everybody's got a campaign for that spot and jockey for it, and how do we prioritize? And that's the customer experience. That's not a campaign initiative. So clients are coming from that perspective. The other side of it, I think, is creative. And I think that with email, right, you don't want to get the same email twice. You're constantly optimizing, and frankly, it's not super sexy creative. So so I think that it's a different team that can react to that in real time. And I think that probably those are two things that agencies need to figure out, not just because of email, but because of the way our industry is evolving.
So I'm going to depart from email. Like a couple of years ago, I would have said content. Content is the thing that's the biggest change in agencies. It's no longer just the creative agency that does the inflatables by the river and calls it content, or the PR agency that comes up with a quiz, and that's content. And media agencies, we work with partners. Content stopped being just the added value thing they throw in to actually be an integral part in what the media agency is trying to do. What I would say it's shifted to, though, is the need to collaborate, which is really, really hard. Like, again, just Bose as an example, I have to collaborate with competing agencies from different holding companies who are also media agencies to agree on one aligned idea, one briefing structure, one partner, and agree a global deal, even though we're two different agencies. It's really hard, but we're doing it, and you know, it's not easy, and it's really bumpy, and sometimes the idea gets watered down too much, and then we get kicked by the client. We have to make it better. But the ability to collaborate with not just your friends but your frenemies, and truly do it, that's what clients want, because we, you know, I'm staring down the barrel of a pitch 6 months ago, and currently the client's there going, I cannot believe you guys can work so well together. And I think that's the key at the moment, is how do you collaborate with the people that you used to be enemies with?
So before you go there, I got, we have a couple more questions, but I was just told we have 1 minute.
Oh.
So we can go a little over, that's okay. But let's see if anyone else has any questions before we go anywhere else. Any other questions?
On the left.
Yes. Pick me on
Anyone
the
out
left, in
there?
the front.
Anyone?
Yes, or you're right, yes.
Would you also agree that part of the issue is why agencies aren't doing as much email or like leveraging CRM data is just generally because brands aren't always open to really pushing that data, and like there's just so many obstacles just to even get that data passed back or have like clean data that's maybe been appended, or even just working like how to in Salesforce so they can push that information back over to you, and like how have you tried to overcome that?
There's definitely, you know, technical challenges to that. I think that I think agencies can perform very well for clients to run their email campaigns or run their retargeting campaigns. You know, it's a matter of them getting into those systems and maybe not actually transferring that data onto another system so that, you know, you can avoid data loss and that type of thing. So
It's just like one person, group, company, etc. should own the data, and it should all stem from them. And clients
Client
probably
should
feel
own the
most
data.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah, but I don't think that clients are opposed to sharing it for like ownership or privacy reasons. I think it's just, I don't know, my perspective is the clients are hiring agencies to do a million things. And if the client's been doing something already for 10 or 15 or 20 years, it's just another thing to add on to what the agency's doing when they're probably really stressed and focused on trying to get the agency to do what they're doing really well, as opposed to giving them another big thing.
Yeah, I think so much of it is just like legacy. You know, if we could start from scratch, you look at companies like Gilt, they're built on email. Starting from scratch, you can be great. Yeah. But all of a sudden you collected these emails, you got these Facebook followers, I had different teams working on things, everybody's got a different framework. We all love frameworks, we're in marketing, right? I think reconciling those things is really challenging, and I think that the role of an agency in order to get out of what we've got going on and be more collaborative is reconciling those frameworks. Like we've seen it, right? We've all seen it. Putting together the cross-agency presentation. All right, well, you've got your little framework structure and your little slugs on your slide. It's that, but it's that times a million when it comes to how clients organize their data, their different tech relationships, how they deploy that, how they think about that. So we don't often get to start from a blank slate.
You don't want your agency to waste time on, like, hey, how do I get the CRM data? How do I get it secured? How do I actually have the protections in place? Like, you're bringing the agency on board for other things where you're not doing it for data security. And agencies, if I was an agency, I wouldn't want that data, because if it's someone that's, 23-year-old media planner and they actually forget to secure the actual email address list and they start sending out a zip file, like, that's the worst thing you could possibly do.
All right, I think we're going to wrap it up here. I want to thank my panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.